Richard Starkey was born on July 7, 1940, in Liverpool's Dingle district, a working-class neighborhood shaped by hardship and resilience. His parents, Richard Starkey Sr. and Elsie Gleave, worked tirelessly to survive, but stability was fragile. When his father left the family in 1943, Ringo was only 3 years old, and his mother became his sole anchor. Childhood offered little normalcy, and illness soon replaced playtime. At 6, a routine appendectomy turned catastrophic when he developed peritonitis, leaving him hospitalized for nearly a year. Just as he returned to school, tuberculosis struck at 13, confining him to a sanatorium for 2 more years. These long absences left him academically behind but emotionally observant. Hospitals became classrooms of endurance, and isolation shaped a boy who learned patience early, unknowingly preparing him for a life that would demand resilience again and again. Music as a lifeline, not an escape. During his years in recovery, music entered Ringo's life not as ambition but as comfort. Hospital staff encouraged rhythm exercises to occupy restless children, and percussion became his refuge. He learned timing and coordination through simple instruments, discovering that rhythm gave structure to days otherwise defined by waiting. When he finally returned home, school no longer fit easily into his life. By 15, he left formal education without qualifications and joined the workforce, taking factory and railway jobs common to boys from his background. Yet music followed him persistently. Skiffle groups were flourishing across Britain, and Ringo joined local bands tapping rhythms on makeshift instruments before earning his first drum kit. Music wasn't rebellion or escape, it was connection. It gave him identity after years of illness had interrupted development. Rhythm allowed him to participate fully in the world again, this time on his own terms. From Liverpool clubs to Hamburg nights, Ringo's transition from local performer to professional musician came when he joined Rory Storm and the Hurricanes in 1959. The band was polished, hardworking, and popular across Liverpool and beyond. Ringo adopted the stage name Ringo Starr, inspired by the rings he wore and his growing confidence as a performer. Their residency in Hamburg, Germany, placed him alongside another struggling group, the Beatles. At the time, the Hurricanes were considered the stronger act, but the overlap forged quiet familiarity. Ringo's drumming stood out for its steadiness and musical instinct rather than technical flash. He occasionally filled in when the Beatles' drummer was unavailable, building trust without expectation. These long nights, demanding schedules, and shared living conditions created bonds that mattered later. When opportunity arrived in 1962, it wasn't chance. It was recognition earned through consistency, reliability, and feel. Becoming a Beatle and facing resistance. When Ringo officially joined the Beatles in August 1962, replacing Pete Best, the reaction was immediate and hostile. Fans loyal to the original lineup protested loudly, and early performances were tense and occasionally dangerous. Ringo absorbed the backlash quietly, focusing on the music rather than public approval. His bandmates supported the decision because his drumming aligned with their evolving sound. Over time, audiences noticed the difference. His relaxed swing, unconventional fills, and instinctive phrasing elevated the band's recordings. Albums like Rubber Soul and Revolver revealed a drummer deeply attuned to mood rather than mechanics. Ringo wasn't competing for attention. He was supporting the song. That approach became central to the Beatles' identity. As the band's fame exploded, Ringo became known as the approachable, humorous presence, yet behind the smile was a man aware that his value was often underestimated. Creative growth and emotional distance. As the Beatles matured creatively, internal tensions grew. Each member evolved differently, and the unity that once defined them became harder to sustain. Ringo often felt peripheral during studio conflicts driven by songwriting disputes and shifting leadership. During the White Album sessions, criticism of his playing left him questioning his place, prompting a brief departure from the band. Though he returned, the experience left a mark. He found solace during that time by writing Octopus's Garden, a song born from the desire for peace rather than attention. While John, Paul, and George wrestled with creative dominance, Ringo tried to preserve balance. When the band dissolved by 1970, he felt the loss deeply. The Beatles weren't just colleagues, they were the constant presence of his adult life. Without them, Ringo faced a future that required reinvention. A solo path built on personality, Ringo's solo career unfolded differently from his former bandmates. Rather than chasing innovation or grand statements, he leaned into warmth and familiarity. His early albums reflected nostalgia, country influences, and emotional accessibility. Songs like It Don't Come Easy and Photograph, co-written with George Harrison, resonated because they felt sincere rather than ambitious. His 1973 album Ringo became his most successful release, benefiting from contributions by all three former Beatles. It wasn't a reunion, but it was a reminder of shared history. Ringo's voice, though limited in range, carried honesty that connected with listeners. He also explored acting, appearing in films that reflected his humor and curiosity. Professionally, he was thriving, but success masked a growing problem. Behind the scenes, excess began to replace balance, and alcohol became a constant companion rather than an indulgence. Addiction and the cost of avoidance. Throughout the 1970s and early 1980s, Ringo struggled with substance abuse that gradually overtook his daily life. What began as social drinking evolved into dependency, affecting his health, relationships, and presence as a father. His first marriage ended under the weight of absence and instability, leaving emotional distance that would take years to repair. After marrying Barbara Bach, the pattern continued, with both struggling to maintain control. Addiction didn't announce itself dramatically, it eroded routines quietly. Eventually, behavior escalated into moments Ringo would later describe with deep regret. One night in 1988 became a turning point when he realized how dangerous his actions had become. The recognition wasn't about public image, it was about survival. Confronting the damage he caused forced him to choose between denial and responsibility. For the first time, he chose recovery, rehabilitation, and rebuilding trust. Ringo and Barbara entered rehabilitation together in 1988, committing to sobriety with honesty and humility. Recovery was not immediate transformation, but steady discipline. He later described sobriety as daily work rather than a finish line. Rebuilding relationships required accountability, particularly with his children, who had grown up during years when he was often absent. He accepted responsibility without excuse, understanding that reconciliation depended on actions rather than explanations. Professionally, sobriety brought clarity. In 1989, he formed the All-Star Band, a collaborative touring concept celebrating shared musical legacies. The project restored joy to performing without pressure. Each tour emphasized camaraderie rather than competition, reinforcing Ringo's belief in collective success. Recovery didn't erase the past, but it allowed him to move forward with intention, proving that growth was still possible, long after mistakes had been made. Health scares and perspective. Ringo's life has also been shaped by serious health challenges beyond addiction. In 1979, he underwent emergency surgery for intestinal complications related to his childhood illness, narrowly avoiding fatal consequences. Later that year, a fire destroyed his home and irreplaceable memorabilia, reinforcing how quickly circumstances can change. These events deepened his awareness of fragility. Rather than withdrawing, he leaned into gratitude and presence. Over time, he adopted routines centered on wellness, reflection, and consistency. He spoke openly about aging, recognizing longevity as a privilege rather than entitlement. Health became a reminder to slow down, to choose moments over momentum. These experiences reshaped how he measured success. Survival, not fame, became the metric. He continued performing, creating, and connecting, but with boundaries informed by experience rather than ambition. Legacy beyond the smile today, Ringo Starr stands as more than the funny Beatle. His legacy is defined by perseverance, accountability, and musical influence that shaped generations. His drumming prioritized feel over complexity, influencing artists across decades. Induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a solo artist affirmed recognition long overdue. More importantly, his life reflects the possibility of growth after failure. Ringo never claimed perfection. Instead, he acknowledged flaws and chose responsibility. At 84, his message of peace and love carries weight not because it is simple, but because it is lived. His story reminds us that joy can coexist with regret, that healing is ongoing, and that survival itself is an achievement. Behind the smile is a man who endured illness, loss, excess, and recovery, and kept moving forward with honesty rather than denial.